Hello everyone, welcome back to PC Species. This week we've got some interesting news items for you, and along with that, a personal update. So this is going to be a different kind of video from what we usually do. This week has been a bit hectic for me because I got to do something that I wanted to do for a long time. So you see, we review GPUs and all of that, and you saw all of those videos, but it's not with the actual product on hand. I just go around, gather the data, check it for parity, and then create the graphs and just present my opinion on whether you should buy the product or not. But we are not getting the actual parts. But then again, I don't think big brands will be thrilled with the idea of sending review samples to a small channel, and especially people like us who are critical when we are supposed to be. I was missing the time when I used to actually test products. So our CPU cooler and PC case reviews in the past, they were stellar. I loved the process. I enjoyed going through the process of really putting everything, the products that we tested through its paces, and it was fun. But then we were not really getting to do that, and I was kind of missing that. But this week I got to do just that. So I thought, why not try something on a product that I actually have, that I actually use, and what can I do to improve it, and also treat that itch of screwing something on and off. So that video you are going to get to see probably next week, and I'll give you a little spoiler for that. Laptop, repasting, lower temperatures, higher performance. So I think it's going to be a fun video. So subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that. Now we are going to talk about the news about what's going on in the world of computers. Starting with the first news item that we have. So Intel is planning a dual large cache CPUs. Okay, so AMD already has their X3D lineup, so Intel is also planning something like that. Now that Intel has also moved to the chiplet design, they're planning a CPU with 3D V-cache on both the core complexes. Now what they are going to call it is up to them. In case of AMD, they call them CCDs. So let's take the example of a 9950 X3D. It has a 16 core processor, so on each CCD it has 8 cores, but only one of those CCDs has the 3D V-cache. Okay, so the problem with that used to be that around the time when the 7950 X3D came out, what Windows would do is that it would park the core complex that had the 3D V-cache and used the non 3D V-cache CCD for gaming. Now that all but eliminated the benefits you get from 3D V-cache, right? So with 9950 X3D, they've sort of fixed it. So you can apparently put on a game mode, which is going to disable the CCD which does not have the 3D V-cache. But then again, it turns the 9950 X3D into probably a glorified 9800 X3D. So what AMD is planning now is to have 3D V-cache on both the core complexes. Now, I am not sure if it is going to be of a lot of benefit, particularly in terms of gaming, because games rarely use more than 8 cores. So only one of the CCDs is going to be used. Another problem with this approach was the connection, the communication between the core complexes. That causes a lot of problems, and even Microsoft cannot do a lot about that. But I see what AMD is trying to do. 3D V-cache on both the core complexes is probably going to help with tasks related to the latest buzzword in the computer world, which is AI. So it is probably going to be beneficial there. Now, more interesting news along these lines is, in addition to adding another CPU with the dual 3D V-cache and all of that, they're planning a lower core part as well. So they're planning an 8-core version for it, 120 watt TDP, 96 MB of L3 cache. It sounds similar to the 9800 X3D, but where it would make sense is that if it turns out to be a 9700 X3D, I think it would bring the performance of 9800 X3D, at least most of it, to a more approachable price point, which I think is a good idea. So a 97 X3D is more than welcome. Next up, we have more processor news. So AMD is planning AM6, and it is going to come with PCI Express 6 and DDR6 support. Now, according to the article, they are going to have more pins than AM5, but they are trying to keep the socket very similar to AM5. So AM6 socket is going to be probably very similar to AM5. Where that would help is that you will be able to carry forward your CPU cooler from AM5 to AM6. Now this is not a given, these are all just rumors, but if it happens, I think it is a very good thing for AMD, because from AM4 to AM5, the switch, AMD did try to implement the same thing, being able to carry forward your coolers, but in some cases it did cause a few problems. So I hope that doesn't happen this time. And this is a really good idea because CPU coolers can be carried forward over generations because they don't really degrade. The only moving part is the fan, at least in case of the air coolers. So a heatsink does not really die. So the idea that you can carry over your cooler from your older PC to your new one is a good one. And I think if this happens, it is going to be a pretty good thing, especially for budget conscious gamers. Now we have more processor news, and AMD is planning another 5000 X3D processor. So the first thing is that they are discontinuing the Ryzen 7 5700 X3D, which is a shame. It was a very good processor. But in addition to the 5600 X3D, they're also planning a 5500 X3D. Now, I don't know how much sense it makes because the 5600 X3D is really hard to find nowadays. But it was a good thing to have that processor because, if you're on Ryzen 3000 or maybe Ryzen 5000 non-X3D parts, an upgrade to an X3D part would have, made your system last for a few years more if you only do gaming. So the 5500 X3D seems like a decent idea, but according to this article, it is going to be limited to Latin America. So we are not going to get our hands on it. Neither, and even the 5600 X3D has mostly been unavailable. I only saw one listing and even that was out of stock, at least here in India. So I don't know, it just seemed like an interesting piece of news. More processor news. So AMD is planning two Ryzen 9000 F series processors. So a 9700F and a 9500F. Again, this is an interesting piece of news because it gives people a more affordable entry into the Ryzen 9000 series. Alright, but then again, the 7500F, which was wildly popular overseas, never really made it to India and it was really hard to find it here. I think that the same thing might happen with the 9700F and the 9500F, but I hope it does not because again, having these processors here in India would help budget conscious gamers to get their hands on a Ryzen 9000 series processor. So I hope they make it to India this time. Now from CPUs, we are going to move on to GPUs. So a while ago, AMD announced the RX 9060 non-XT. Now it was supposed to be a decent enough GPU. There was some, it was a cut down version of the 9060 XT, 1792 stream processors and all of that. Now on AMD's website and even in this article, you can find AMD's own benchmarks of how the RX 9060 performs. So at native 1080p ultra settings, you can expect 108 FPS in Mirage, 98 FPS in Black Ops 6, Doom Eternal with ray tracing 153 FPS, and you can take a look at the rest of them by pausing the video. Now, in theory, the RX 9060 seems like a very good GPU, but then there's a problem. So, for some reason, AMD has decided that they are not going to release this card into the DIY market. So the RX 9060 will only be available via system integrators and in pre-built PCs only. I really do not understand this move because, this card would have made a lot of sense. But then if you move on to the next article, here we see an ASRock 9060 card. So I don't really know what's going on here. It could have easily been a DIY card as well. Now, why I think the 9060 is interesting because some tech reviewer from Korea was able to get their hands on the 9060 and they summarized that the 9060 was around 19% faster than the RTX 5050. Now, this would have been really nice if this card made into the DIY market because considering that we have the RTX 5060 and the RX 9060 non-XT is really close to the 5060 in terms of performance, priced around 25,000, maybe even 26,000, this card would have made a lot of sense. But then again, we have the Arc B580 there as well. But if you wanted to go with a more trusted, more experienced GPU maker, it would have provided us with one more option in this price point, and undercutting the RTX 5060 by 4 or 5,000 would have made a lot of sense for AMD. So it's a shame that we are not getting this card. Now the last bit of news, another GPU bit. So we have RDNA5 or UDNA as most people are calling it. So AMD has shared some schematics and all of that. Some leaker got their hands on it. So I don't know, this is all a lot of technical stuff. I'll just put the links to them Links to all of these articles in the description. You can check them out if you want to. But the more interesting bit about this piece is that AMD is going to compete in the higher end market as well. So in RDNA 5 or UDNA, they are going to have a flagship GPU. At the moment, they have the 9070 XT, which competes with the 5070 Ti, but the 5080 and the 5090 are roaming scot-free. No competition at all. So some competition from AMD in that space as well is only good news for us, because more competition means better products and probably less pricing. So I really hope AMD does that, launches a flagship GPU against the 5080 and maybe even a 5090. So let's see how that goes. For now, for this video, this is it. These are all the news items, and that what I shared earlier was a bit of a personal update. So if you like the content, like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. And other than that, I'll see you in the next one.